Sergeant Mary E. Hieronymian's off-duty heroism. The morning routine. The alarm blared at 0430, a sharp, insistent buzz that cut through the pre-dawn silence of Sergeant Mary E. Hieronymian's barracks room. She stirred under the thin army-issue blanket, her eyes blinking open to the dim glow of a street lamp filtering through the blinds. Fort Hamilton, a sprawling base on the edge of a fictionalized Midwestern city, was still asleep, save for the faint hum of a distant generator and the occasional crunch of gravel under a night shift patrol. Mary reached for her phone, silencing the alarm with a practiced swipe. Her body ached faintly from yesterday's ruck march, 12 miles with a 30-pound pack, but she pushed the discomfort aside. Pain was just part of the deal. Mary swung her legs over the bed, her bare feet hitting the cool linoleum floor. The room was sparse, functional, a twin bed, a metal desk piled with neatly organized field manuals, and a small locker holding her uniforms. A single photo frame sat on the desk, a grainy snapshot of her family back in Georgia, her mother beaming in a sundress, her younger brother flashing a goofy grin. Mary allowed herself a brief glance at it, a reminder of why she'd enlisted 5 years ago at 22. Duty wasn't just a word, it was a promise to them, to herself, to the soldiers she led. She stood, stretching her arms overhead, her lean frame casting a shadow against the cinderblock wall. At 27, Mary was a non-commissioned officer, a sergeant in the 3rd Battalion, 15th Infantry Regiment, a logistics unit tasked with keeping supplies flowing, fuel, ammo, food, for the brigade. It wasn't glamorous, but it was critical. No beans, no bullets, no battle, her first sergeant liked to say, and Mary took pride in making sure her unit was never short. She'd earned her stripes through meticulous work and a knack for staying calm when others panicked, a trait that had served her well in her first deployment to Kuwait 2 years prior. The morning routine was sacred, a rhythm that grounded her. She pulled on her Army physical fitness uniform, black shorts, gray t-shirt with Army stenciled in bold, and running shoes worn thin at the soles. Her short black hair was already pinned back, no fuss needed. She grabbed her water bottle, checked her watch, 0440, and headed for the door. Physical training started at 0600, but Mary liked to get to the PT field early to mentally prep. Leadership, she'd learned, wasn't just about giving orders, it was about being ready before anyone else. Outside, the air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of diesel from the motor pool a quarter-mile away. Fort Hamilton wasn't the biggest base, nothing like Bragg or Hood, but it had a quiet efficiency Mary appreciated. The barracks, a cluster of low-slung buildings, glowed faintly under sodium lights. She jogged lightly to warm up, her breath visible in the early February chill. The sky was still dark, stars fading as dawn crept closer. A few other early risers were out, soldiers heading to the gym or grabbing coffee from the DFAC, but the base felt hushed, like it was holding its breath. Mary's sedan, a 2009 Honda Civic she'd bought used after basic training, was parked in the lot behind the barracks. The car was a relic, dents on the hood, a cracked windshield wiper, but it was hers, paid off with her first re-enlistment bonus. She slid into the driver's seat, the familiar creak of the door a small comfort. The engine sputtered to life, and she pulled onto the main road cutting through the base. The PT field was a 10-minute drive, past the headquarters building and the motor pool where her unit's Humvees and supply trucks were lined up like silent sentinels. As she drove, Mary's mind wandered to the day ahead. After PT, she had a briefing with her platoon leader about an upcoming field exercise. Logistics wasn't just pushing paperwork, it was anticipating needs, troubleshooting breakdowns, and ensuring the mission didn't stall. She'd spent the previous evening double-checking inventory reports, catching a clerical error that could have delayed a fuel shipment. Her soldiers teased her about her perfectionism, but she didn't mind. Better to sweat now than bleed later, her old drill sergeant used to say, and the word stuck. Her thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice crackling through her memory, Specialist Jenkins, her closest friend in the unit. Jenkins, a wiry 22-year-old from Chicago, had a habit of needling Mary about her routine. "Sarge, "You ever sleep in?" "Like, ever?" he'd asked at the DFAC last week, grinning over a plate of powdered eggs. Mary had shot back, "Sleeps for civilians," but she'd laughed, his humor a welcome break from the grind. Jenkins was part of her squad, a motor transport operator who drove the big trucks. He'd be at PT, probably complaining about the cold, and she looked forward to the banter. The road wound past the parade field, where a flagpole stood bare, waiting for the morning colors ceremony. Mary glanced at it, a reflex born of respect. She'd stood in formation for countless ceremonies, the national anthem grounding her in something bigger than herself. Her parents hadn't understood her choice to enlist. Her mother wanted her to be a nurse, her father a teacher, but they'd come around when they saw her in uniform at her basic training graduation. Her brother, now 16, thought she was a superhero, a notion she found both embarrassing and motivating. At 0500, the base was stirring. A few Humvees rumbled by, likely maintenance crews heading to the motor pool. Mary's unit, the 3 to 15 Infantry's logistics company, relied on those vehicles for everything from supply runs to convoy ops. She knew every driver in her platoon, their quirks and strengths. Private Daniel Carter, a new kid from Texas, was one of them. 19, eager, but green, still learning to handle the Humvee's weight on tight turns. She'd mentored him during last week's driver training, correcting his tendency to oversteer. "Slow is smooth, smooth is fast," she told him, echoing her own training. The PT field was near the edge of the base, a wide expanse of grass bordered by a running track and bleachers. Mary liked the openness of it, the way it felt like a blank slate each morning. She was halfway there, the road curving past a row of maintenance sheds, when something caught her eye. A Humvee, one of hers, she recognized the unit markings, was moving too fast on the parallel road. It was maybe 100 yards ahead, its headlights slicing through the dimness. The vehicle swerved slightly, then corrected, but something about its speed set her nerves on edge. Mary's grip tightened on the steering wheel. She'd seen enough convoys to know when a driver was off. The Humvee accelerated, its engine growling, and she squinted to make out the driver. Too dark to tell, but the vehicle was definitely from her company. Her radio, clipped to her PT belt, was silent, no chatter about an emergency. She considered calling it in but hesitated, maybe it was just a soldier late for a shift, pushing the limit. The intersection ahead was a four-way stop, a quiet crossing near the motor pool where traffic was usually light. Mary slowed her Civic, checking her mirrors out of habit. The Humvee was approaching the same intersection from the right, its speed unchanged. Her stomach twisted. "Come on, slow down," she muttered, her voice barely audible over the hum of her engine. The Humvee hit the intersection, its tires squealing as it took the turn too wide. It clipped the curb, the heavy frame lurching violently. Time seemed to compress. The Humvee's front end lifted, then slammed down, the momentum flipping it onto its side. Metal screeched against asphalt, sparks. "System, I apologize for the incomplete response." The narrative for Part 1, the morning routine, was cut off due to length constraints in the previous output. Below, I'll complete the story, ensuring it reaches approximately 5,000 words by continuing from the point of the Humvee crash and focusing on Mary's initial reaction, while maintaining the established tone, military realism, and narrative arc. The story will conclude Part 1 as outlined, with Mary pulling over to respond to the crisis. I'll aim to balance descriptive detail, character depth, and pacing to meet the word count while staying true to Sergeant Mary E. Hieronymian's heroism. If you need further adjustments or prefer a different approach, let me know. The Humvee flipped with a sickening crunch, its heavy frame rolling once more before coming to rest upside down, wheels spinning uselessly in the air. Sparks flew where metal scraped pavement, and the acrid smell of burning rubber hit Mary's nose as she slammed her Civic into park. Her heart pounded, a drumbeat in her chest, but her training kicked in like a reflex. 5 years in the army, countless drills, and a deployment in Kuwait had wired her for moments like this. She grabbed her radio, clipped to her PT belt, and keyed the mic, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Any station, this is Sergeant Ihairinwian, 3 to 15 log. Vehicle accident at the intersection of Bravo and 4th, request emergency services, over. She didn't wait for a response, tossing the radio onto the passenger seat and swinging her door open. The base was waking up, but the intersection was still deserted, the pre-dawn quiet amplifying the hiss of the Humvee's radiator and the faint groan from inside the wreckage. Mary sprinted toward the overturned vehicle, her running shoes slapping the asphalt. The Humvee was a beast, 7,000 pounds of steel and armor, now crumpled like a discarded toy. Fuel dripped onto the road, a glistening pool that caught the faint glow of a street lamp. Her combat lifesaver training flashed through her mind, assess the scene, ensure safety, prioritize life-threatening injuries. Step 1, don't become a casualty yourself. She scanned for hazards, no visible flames, no downed power lines, but the fuel leak was a ticking clock. She needed to move fast. Stay with me, soldier, she called out, her voice firm but calm, projecting the authority she'd honed as an NCO. She didn't know who was inside yet, but she'd heard a sound, someone was alive. Dropping to her knees, she peered through the shattered driver's side window. The interior was a mess of twisted gear and broken glass, but she spotted movement. Private Daniel Carter, the kid from Texas, was strapped in, hanging upside down, his face pale and bloodied. His eyes were open, unfocused, and a low moan escaped his lips. "Carter, it's Sergeant Ihairinwian. You're gonna be okay. Talk to me, bud." Mary kept her tone steady, a lifeline to keep him grounded. She'd mentored Carter for weeks, seen his nervous grin during driver training. He was 19, barely a year out of high school, with a drawl that made the other soldiers tease him mercilessly. Now, he was her responsibility, and she wasn't losing him. Another soldier, a specialist from a different unit, jogged up, his PT uniform damp with early morning sweat. "Sarge, what the hell happened?" he asked, eyes wide. "Get back to the road, flag down any vehicles, and keep the area clear," Mary ordered, pointing to the intersection. "MPs and medics are en route. Move." The specialist nodded and sprinted off, his boots echoing in the quiet. Mary crawled closer to the Humvee, glass crunching under her knees. The door was warped, jammed shut, but she could reach through the window. Carter's left arm was pinned awkwardly, blood seeping from a gash above his elbow. His breathing was shallow, his face slick with sweat. "Hey, Carter, you remember that time Jenkins tried to borrow your hot sauce for the MREs?" she said, forcing a smile. "You chased him around the motor pool. Tell me about it." Carter's eyes flickered, focusing on her. "Sarge, hurts," he rasped, his voice weak. "I know, kid. Help's coming. Stay with me." Mary's hands moved on autopilot, checking his pulse, rapid but steady. She couldn't risk moving him yet, spinal injuries were a real possibility after a rollover. Her CLS bag was back in her room, but she always carried basics. She yanked her PT belt off, the black elastic sturdy enough for a makeshift tourniquet. Wrapping it around Carter's arm above the gash, she tightened it until the bleeding slowed to a trickle. "You're doing great, Carter. Keep talking." Her mind raced through the CLS checklist: airway, breathing, circulation. Carter was breathing, but the angle of his neck worried her. She needed to stabilize it, but without a cervical collar, her options were limited. She reached through the window, gently supporting his head with one hand while scanning for other injuries. No visible chest wounds, no sucking sounds that would indicate a collapsed lung. Small mercies. In the distance, sirens wailed, base emergency services, finally. Mary's radio crackled with a response: "Sergeant Ihairinwian, this is Fort Hamilton EMS. ETA 2 minutes. Sitrep, over." "One casualty, male, conscious but disoriented," Mary replied, her voice clipped. Possible spinal injury, left arm laceration, bleeding controlled. Fuel leak on scene. Over. Roger, stand by. Mary's thoughts flickered to her first deployment, a supply convoy in Kuwait where an IED had taken out a lead vehicle. She'd lost a friend that day, a driver who'd been laughing over bad coffee hours earlier. The memory burned, but she shoved it down. Carter wasn't going to be another ghost in her head. Not today. She kept talking to him, nonsense about the unit's last barbecue, anything to keep him alert. You burned that burger to a crisp, Carter. Jenkins said it was a war crime. A weak chuckle escaped him, a good sign. His color was still bad, but his eyes were tracking her now. Headlights swept the intersection as an MP vehicle and an ambulance screeched to a stop. The specialist she'd sent was directing traffic, keeping a growing crowd of early risers at bay. Medics spilled out, gear in hand, and Mary waved them over. Private. Carter, pinned in the driver's seat, she reported, sliding back to give them room. Tourniquet on the left arm, possible neck injury. He's responsive. A medic nodded, crouching beside her. Good work, Sergeant. We'll take it from here. Mary stood, her legs shaky from the adrenaline. She stepped back but didn't leave, watching as the medics assessed Carter, their hands moving with practiced efficiency. The MPs were setting up a perimeter, and a fire truck rolled in to handle the fuel leak. Her job wasn't done, she'd need to brief her chain of command, file a report, maybe face questions about why one of her soldiers was driving like a bat out of hell, but for now, Carter was alive. She took a deep breath, the cold air grounding her. The sky was lightening, a faint pink smudging the horizon. Another day at Fort Hamilton, but not just another day. Mary glanced at her Civic, still idling by the curb, and felt the weight of the moment settle. She'd done what she was trained to do, what she'd sworn to do. But as the medics worked and the sirens faded into background noise, she knew this wasn't over. Not for her, not for Carter, not for the unit. The crash response. The overturned Humvee lay like a wounded beast, its undercarriage exposed to the pre-dawn sky, wheels spinning lazily in the chill February air. Sergeant Mary E. Hyarinwian crouched beside the wreckage, her knees grinding into the asphalt littered with glass and twisted metal. The acrid stench of leaking fuel stung her nostrils, and the faint hiss of the radiator underscored the eerie quiet of Fort Hamilton's intersection. Private Daniel Carter hung upside down in the driver's seat, strapped in by his seatbelt, his face pale and streaked with blood. His shallow breaths and low moans told Mary he was alive, but barely. Her heart hammered, but her training was a steel rod in her spine, holding her steady. "Carter, stay with me," she said, her voice calm but commanding, cutting through the haze of pain she knew he was in. "You're gonna be fine. Just keep those eyes on me." She'd seen him in the motor pool, all lanky limbs and nervous energy, a 19-year-old private who'd joined her logistics company just 3 months ago. Now, he was her mission, and she wasn't losing him. Mary's combat lifesaver training kicked in like muscle memory. Step 1, assess the scene for safety. The fuel leak was a problem, sparks or a stray cigarette could turn this into a fireball, but no flames were visible, and the air was clear of electrical hazards. Step 2, evaluate the casualty. Carter's left arm was pinned at an awkward angle, blood seeping from a deep gash above his elbow. His neck hung at a slight tilt, raising red flags for a possible spinal injury. Moving him was out of the question until the medics arrived, but she could stabilize him. She glanced back at the intersection, where the specialist she'd sent to secure the area was waving off a curious jogger in PT gear. Her radio crackled on her hip, the EMS team's voice cutting through. "Sergeant E. Hyarinwian, ETA 1 minute. Confirmed casualty status, over." "One male, conscious, pinned in the driver's seat," Mary replied, her thumb steady on the mic, "left arm laceration, bleeding controlled with a tourniquet. Possible cervical injury. Fuel leak on scene, no fire. Over." Roger, stand by. 1 minute. 60 seconds to keep Carter alive. Mary leaned closer to the shattered driver's side window, ignoring the glass biting into her palms. Carter, you remember that driver training last week? You almost took out the cone course. She forced a smile, her voice a lifeline to keep him alert. Jenkins bet me $10 you'd fail the test. You proved him wrong. Carter's lips twitched, a weak attempt at a grin. Sarge, hurts bad, he rasped, his Texas drawl slurred. I know, bud. Help's almost here. Tell me about that hot sauce you're always bragging about. Your mom's recipe, right? She needed him talking, needed his brain engaged to fight the shock creeping in. His pulse was rapid under her fingers, but steady. Good enough for now. Mary's PT belt, now a makeshift tourniquet, was tight around Carter's arm, the black elastic digging into his skin. The bleeding had slowed, but the gash was deep, likely from jagged metal inside the cab. She scanned his body for other injuries, her eyes darting over his chest, legs, and head. No sucking chest wounds, no obvious fractures, but his breathing was too shallow, his face too pale. Shock was a real risk, and she had no kit to push fluids. Her hands itched for her CLS bag, left in her barracks room, but she made do. Improvise, adapt, overcome, the Army's mantra was her gospel. Flashbacks hit her unbidden, sharp and vivid. Kuwait, 2018. A supply convoy ambushed, an IED flipping a lead truck. She'd been in the third vehicle, close enough to feel the heat of the blast. Her friend, SPC Ramirez, hadn't made it, his laughter silenced forever in the desert dust. Mary had dragged another soldier to cover that day, her hands slick with blood, her ears ringing. The memory clawed at her, but she shoved it down. Carter wasn't Ramirez. She wouldn't let him become another name on a memorial wall. Carter, you still with me? She asked, her voice sharper now, pulling him back. His eyes fluttered, focusing on her. Good. Tell me about that hot sauce. Spicy enough to make Jenkins cry? Burned, his tongue off, Carter mumbled, a faint spark in his voice. Mary nodded, relieved. He was fighting. She adjusted her grip on his head, supporting his neck to minimize movement. Without a cervical collar, it was the best she could do. Her other hand checked the tourniquet, ensuring it hadn't loosened. The fuel leak worried her, the pool was spreading, inching closer to the Humvee's hot engine. She needed the fire team here, now. As if on cue, the wail of sirens grew louder, and headlights swept the intersection. The ambulance screeched to a stop, followed by an MP vehicle and a fire truck. Boots hit the ground, voices barking orders. 2 medics, clad in high-vis vests, crouched beside her. Sergeant, what we got? The lead medic, a staff sergeant with a clipboard, asked. Private Carter, pinned, conscious, Mary reported, sliding back slightly but staying close. Tourniquet on the left arm, bleeding controlled. Possible spinal injury, haven't moved him. He's responsive but fading. Solid work, the medic said, pulling out a cervical collar. We'll take it from here. You got a pulse? Rapid, steady. About 110, Mary replied, her CLS training making the handoff seamless. She watched as the medics worked, one securing Carter's neck while the other checked his vitals. The fire team moved in, spraying foam to neutralize the fuel leak, their movements precise despite the chaos. Mary stood, her legs shaky from crouching, her hands smeared with Carter's blood. The MPs were cordoning off the area, their radios crackling with updates. A small crowd of soldiers had gathered, kept at bay by the specialist she'd tasked. She recognized a few faces from her company, their expressions a mix of shock and concern. Jenkins was among them, his usual grin gone, his eyes locked on the wreckage. Sarge, that's Carter's Humvee, Jenkins said, jogging over. What the hell happened? Don't know yet, Mary said, her voice clipped. "He's alive. Focus on that." She didn't have time for speculation. Her job was to keep things together, and that meant keeping her squad grounded. The medics were cutting Carter's seatbelt, stabilizing his spine with a backboard. Mary hovered nearby, her instincts screaming to stay involved, but she knew her role was done, for now. The lead medic called out, "We're extracting. Get the stretcher ready." The fire team had the fuel under control, and the MPs were directing traffic as more vehicles arrived. The base was fully awake now, the dawn light casting long shadows over the scene. Mary's mind raced, piecing together what she'd seen. Carter had been driving too fast, reckless for a Humvee on base roads. Why? A late shift? A personal crisis? She'd trained him better than that, drilled him on vehicle safety until her voice was hoarse. The questions gnawed at her, but she pushed them aside. Her job wasn't to judge, it was to act. As the medic slid Carter onto the stretcher, his eyes found hers. "Sarge, thanks," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "You're welcome, kid," Mary said, her throat tight. "You owe me a burger for this." It was a weak attempt at humor, but it drew a faint smile from him before the medics wheeled him to the ambulance. The ambulance doors slammed shut, and the vehicle peeled out, sirens blaring. Mary stood rooted, her hands clenched, the adrenaline ebbing and leaving a hollow ache in its wake. The fire team was wrapping up, the MPs taking statements from the specialist and a few onlookers. Jenkins lingered nearby, his usual chatter absent. "He's gonna make it, right?" he asked, his voice low. "He's tough," Mary said, more to herself than to him. "He'll pull through." She turned back to her Civic, still idling by the curb, its headlights cutting through the morning haze. The intersection was a mess, glass, foam, and tire marks, but Carter was alive. She'd done her job, but the weight of it lingered. Her radio crackled again, her platoon leader's voice, "Sergeant Ihairinwian, report to HQ for debrief. Now." "Roger, sir," she replied, her voice steady despite the exhaustion creeping in. She glanced at the Humvee one last time, its mangled frame a stark reminder of how fast things could change. Dawn was breaking, the sky a soft pink, but for Mary, the day had already begun in fire and blood. The aftermath. The ambulance's sirens faded into the dawn, leaving Sergeant Mary Ihairinwian standing at the edge of the intersection, her hands still tacky with Private Carter's blood. The overturned Humvee, now surrounded by MPs and fire crew, loomed like a scar on the Fort Hamilton asphalt. The morning air was warming, the pink sky giving way to a pale blue, but Mary felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Her radio crackled again, her platoon leader's voice sharp, "Sergeant Ihairinwian, report to HQ for debrief. Now." "Roger, sir," Mary replied, her voice steady despite the exhaustion seeping into her bones. She glanced at her Civic, still idling by the curb, its headlights dim in the growing light. Specialist Jenkins lingered nearby, his usual smirk replaced by a tight-lipped frown. "Sarge, you good?" he asked, his eyes flicking to her blood-streaked hands. "I'm fine," she said, wiping her palms on her PT shorts. "Get the squad to PT. I'll catch up after this." Jenkins nodded, but his hesitation told her he was rattled. The whole company would be, once word of Carter's crash spread. She didn't have time to reassure him, she had to move. The drive to headquarters was a blur, the base's familiar roads feeling alien under the weight of the morning's events. Fort Hamilton's headquarters building was a squat, brick structure, its flagpole bare until the 0800 colors ceremony. Mary parked, straightened her PT uniform, and strode inside, ignoring the ache in her knees from crouching by the wreckage. The orderly room was already buzzing, a mix of NCOs and officers prepping for the day. Her platoon leader, Lieutenant Rodriguez, was waiting in his office, a small space cluttered with maps and coffee mugs. "Sergeant, take a seat," Rodriguez said, his tone clipped but not unkind. He was in his early 30s, a West Point grad with a knack for logistics and a reputation for fairness. "Walk me through it." Mary stood at parade rest, habit overriding exhaustion. "Sir, at approximately 0515, I was en route to PT when I observed a Humvee from our company traveling at high speed on Bravo Road. It hit the intersection at 4th, clipped the curb, and rolled, landing upside down. I stopped, secured the scene, and found Private Carter pinned in the driver's seat. Applied a tourniquet to his left arm, stabilized his neck, and kept him responsive until EMS arrived. Fuel leak was present, but the fire team neutralized it." Rodriguez leaned back, scribbling notes. "You acted fast. Saved his life, from what I'm hearing. EMS said your tourniquet was textbook." He paused, studying her. "Any idea why Carter was driving like that?" "No, sir," Mary admitted. "He was disoriented, couldn't talk much." Her mind flashed to Carter's pale face, his slurred words. She'd trained him to drive Humvees, spent hours correcting his oversteering. Had she missed something? A knot of guilt tightened in her chest. "We'll get a statement from him when he's stable," Rodriguez said. "MPs are investigating. Looks like he was alone, no other vehicles involved. You'll need to file a formal report by 1200. For now, clean up and get to PT. Your squad's waiting." "Yes, sir." Mary saluted, her movements crisp despite the weight on her shoulders. She left the office, the hallway's fluorescent lights harsh against her tired eyes. The debrief had been straightforward, but the questions lingered. Why was Carter speeding? Was it a mistake, or something deeper? She pushed the thoughts aside, she had a job to do. Back at her barracks, Mary showered quickly, the hot water washing away blood and grime but not the unease. She changed into a fresh PT uniform, her fingers lingering on the sergeant's chevron sewn onto her sleeve. Leadership meant carrying the load, even when it felt too heavy. She grabbed her notebook, jotting down details for the incident report, time, location, actions taken. The Army loved paperwork, and she wasn't about to let a sloppy report tarnish her work. By 0630, she was at the PT field, where her squad was already stretching under the watchful eye of Staff Sergeant Monroe, the platoon sergeant. The field was alive with soldiers, running laps, doing push-ups, the air filled with shouts and the rhythmic thud of boots. Jenkins spotted her and jogged over, his face still pale. "Sarge, how's Carter?" "In the hospital," Mary said, keeping her voice level. "He's stable. Medics are handling it." She didn't mention the blood, the pinned arm, or the way Carter's eyes had flickered with fear. Her squad didn't need that image, they needed her steady. Monroe called the platoon to formation, and Mary took her place at the front of her squad. The PT session was brutal, sprints, burpees, and a 2-mile run, but Mary welcomed the burn. It kept her mind off the crash, off the what-ifs. Her soldiers followed her lead, though she caught their glances, their whispered questions about Carter. Word traveled fast in a company of 120. After PT, Mary headed to the DFAC for a quick breakfast, grabbing a tray of eggs and toast. Jenkins slid into the seat across from her, his tray piled high. "Sarge, you're a damn hero," he said, trying to force his usual grin. "Carter owes you his life." "Cut it out," Mary said, poking at her eggs. "I did my job. You'd have done the same." "Maybe," Jenkins said, his voice softer. "But you were there. That's what counts." Mary didn't respond, her thoughts drifting to the hospital. She needed to see Carter, to know he was really okay. The guilt was still there, a quiet nag. Had she trained him well enough? Could she have stopped him from getting behind that wheel? She pushed her tray away, appetite gone, and stood. "I'm heading to the hospital after the report. You're in charge of the squad till I'm back." Jenkins nodded, no jokes this time. Got it, Sarge. The incident report took an hour, Mary's pen moving methodically as she detailed every moment, the Humvee's speed, the rollover, her CLS actions. She submitted it to Rodriguez, who gave her a nod of approval. Good work, Sergeant. Check on Carter, then get some rest. That's an order. The base hospital was a short drive, a modern building with wide windows and a steady stream of soldiers and dependents. Mary parked and walked inside, the sterile smell of antiseptic hitting her like a wave. She found Carter's room on the second floor, a private space with monitors beeping softly. He was awake, propped up in bed, his left arm bandaged and his neck in a cervical collar. Bruises marred his face, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. Sarge, he croaked, his voice hoarse. You saved my ass. Mary pulled up a chair, her throat tight. Just doing my job, Carter. How you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck, he said, managing a weak smile. Docs say I'll be okay. Arms messed up, might need surgery. Neck's bruised, not broken. Mary nodded, relief washing over her. What happened out there, Dan? You were driving like you were late for your own funeral. Carter's smile faded, his eyes dropping to the blanket. I screwed up. Got a call from home last night. My sister, she's sick, real bad. I wasn't thinking straight. Took the Humvee out to clear my head, wasn't supposed to. Just, lost it. Mary's chest ached. She'd seen soldiers unravel under personal stress, deployments, family issues, the weight of the job. She should have noticed Carter was struggling. You should have told me, Carter. We could have talked it out. He shook his head, wincing as he shifted. Didn't want to bother anyone. Thought I could handle it. Mary leaned forward, her voice firm but gentle. You're not alone in this, Dan. You've got a squad, a chain of command. You lean on us, understand? He nodded, eyes glistening. Yes, Sarge. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just get better. She stood, squeezing his shoulder lightly. Rest up. I'll check on you tomorrow. Outside the room, Mary leaned against the wall, the conversation replaying in her mind. Carter's mistake had nearly cost him his life, but she couldn't shake her own guilt. As his NCO, she was supposed to notice when her soldiers were off. She'd missed the signs. The weight of leadership felt heavier than ever. Back at the barracks, the squad was gathered in the day room, their chatter quieting when she entered. Jenkins stood, holding out a bottle of water. For the hero, he said, his grin back but softer. Knock it off, Mary said, taking the bottle. Any word from the hospital? He's stable, SPC Lopez chimed in, a young soldier who idolized Mary. MPs are still poking around the Humvee. They're saying mechanical failure's unlikely. Mary nodded, filing that away. The investigation would sort it out. Her job was to keep her squad together. All right, listen up, she said, addressing the group. Carter's gonna pull through, but he's got a long road. We're a team, and we cover each other. If anyone's struggling, you talk to me or Monroe. No lone wolf crap, got it? Yes, Sergeant, they chorused, their voices a mix of respect and relief. Later, in her room, Mary sat on her bed, staring at the family photo on her desk. Her mother's smile, her brother's goofy grin, they felt a world away. She'd enlisted to make them proud, to be more than a small-town girl with big dreams. But moments like this tested her, made her question if she was enough. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mom, heard about the crash. You okay? News traveled fast, even to Georgia. Mary typed back, I'm good. Love you. She set the phone down, her eyes heavy. The day wasn't over, there'd be more reports, more questions, but for now, she'd done enough. Carter was alive. That was her victory. Legacy and growth. 5 months had passed since the Humvee flipped at the intersection of Bravo and 4th, but for Sergeant Mary E. Hyarinwian, the memory was as sharp as the glass that had cut her palms that February morning. Fort Hamilton had returned to its rhythm, PT at dawn, supply runs, endless paperwork, but the crash had left its mark, not just on the asphalt but on her unit, her soldiers, and herself. Mary stood in her barracks room, adjusting her Army service uniform, the crisp green fabric a stark contrast to the blood-stained PT gear she'd worn that day. Today was her E6 promotion board, a step toward staff sergeant, and the weight of expectation sat heavy on her shoulders. The room was unchanged, twin bed, metal desk, the family photo from Georgia. But Mary felt different. Saving Private Daniel Carter had shifted something in her, a quiet clarity about why she wore the uniform. She checked her ribbons, Army Achievement Medal, Good Conduct Medal, her Kuwait deployment ribbon, ensuring each was perfectly aligned. The board would grill her on leadership, regulations, and her record. She'd been studying for weeks, drilling with Staff Sergeant Monroe on everything from land navigation to NCO creed. But as she straightened her beret, her thoughts drifted to Carter, to the unit, to the ripple effects of that chaotic morning. Carter was back on limited duty now, his left arm still in a brace after surgery, his neck healed but stiff. He'd returned to the 3rd Battalion, 15th Infantry Regiment's logistics company 2 weeks ago, greeted with slaps on the back and Jenkins' inevitable hot sauce jokes. Mary had watched from a distance, proud but cautious. Carter's mistake, speeding in a Humvee after a distressing call about his sick sister, had nearly cost him everything. The MPs had ruled it driver error, not mechanical failure, and Carter faced non-judicial punishment, a reduction in rank to private and extra duty. But he was alive, and that was what mattered. Mary grabbed her notebook, stuffed with promotion study guides, and headed out. The October air was crisp, the base alive with morning activity. Humvees rumbled toward the motor pool, soldiers jogged in formation, and the flagpole outside headquarters stood ready for colors. She passed the intersection where the crash had happened, now just another stretch of road, the scars paved over. But she could still see the overturned Humvee, hear Carter's weak voice. She shook it off, focusing on the board. Leadership wasn't dwelling on the past, it was moving forward. At headquarters, the promotion board was set up in a conference room, a long table flanked by senior NCOs and officers. Mary stood at attention, her heart steady despite the scrutiny. The board president, Command Sergeant Major Ellis, a grizzled veteran with eyes like steel, opened with a nod. Sergeant E. Hyarinwian, tell us why you deserve to be a staff sergeant. Mary took a breath, her voice clear. Sergeant Major, I've served 5 years as a logistics NCO, ensuring my unit's mission never falters. I've led my squad through deployments and crises, like the vehicle accident in February where I stabilized a soldier until EMS arrived. I'm committed to developing my soldiers, upholding Army values, and executing the mission. The questions came fast: chain of command, maintenance protocols, leadership scenarios. Mary answered with precision, drawing on her experience and training. One question caught her off guard: how do you handle a soldier who's struggling personally, like Private Carter was? Ellis's eyes bored into her. Mary paused, the memory of Carter's pale face flashing. You listen, Sergeant Major. You watch for signs, changes in behavior, missed details. You build trust so they come to you before it spirals. With Carter, I missed those signs, but I've learned to check in more, to ask the hard questions. It's on me to keep my soldiers ready, on and off duty. Ellis nodded, jotting a note. The board wrapped after 30 minutes, and Mary left, her legs shaky but her head high. Monroe was waiting outside, arms crossed. How'd it go, E. Hyarinwian? Gave it my all, Sergeant, she said, a small smile breaking through. Now we wait. Back at the company area, Mary found her squad prepping for a supply run. Jenkins was barking orders, his usual energy dialed up. "Sarge, you aced that board, didn't you?" he called, tossing her a mock salute. "We'll see," Mary said, deflecting. "Focus on the trucks. We've got a convoy tomorrow." She noticed a new face among the soldiers, Private Emily Ruiz, a recent basic training grad assigned to the company. Ruiz was 19, petite, with a nervous energy that reminded Mary of Carter when he'd first arrived. She'd caught Ruiz watching her during PT, wide-eyed, like Mary was larger than life. It was flattering but uncomfortable. Mary didn't see herself as a hero, just a soldier doing her job. "Ruiz, walk with me," Mary said, gesturing toward the motor pool. The private fell in step, clutching a clipboard. "How you settling in?" "Good, Sergeant," Ruiz said, her voice high-pitched. "It's a lot. But I heard what you did for Carter. Everyone talks about it. I want to be that kind of NCO someday." Mary's chest tightened. The crash had become unit lore, whispered in the DFAC and barracks. She didn't like the attention, but she saw an opportunity. "You want to lead, Ruiz? Start by knowing your soldiers. Carter was struggling, and I didn't see it. Don't make that mistake. Watch, listen, care." Ruiz nodded, her eyes serious. "Yes, Sergeant. I'll try." The conversation lingered with Mary as she checked the Humvees, ensuring fuel cans and tie-downs were secure. The crash had spurred changes, stricter driver training, mandatory counseling check-ins, and a new CLS refresher course she'd pushed for. Her after-action report had highlighted gaps. Soldiers needed better tools to handle stress, and drivers needed more night training. Lieutenant Rodriguez had listened, and the brigade had implemented her recommendations. It wasn't a medal, but it was impact, and that felt better. That evening, Mary visited Carter at his barracks. He was sorting gear, his arm brace bulky but functional. "Sarge," he greeted, standing straighter. "Heard you're up for Staff Sergeant. You deserve it." "Thanks, Dan," Mary said, leaning against the doorframe. "How's the arm?" "Getting there," he said, flexing his fingers. "Docs say I'll be full duty by spring. My sister's doing better, too, chemo's working." His voice caught, and he looked away. "I owe you, Sarge. I was a dumbass, and you didn't let me die." "You're not a dumbass," Mary said firmly. "You made a mistake. We all do. You learn, you move on. Got it?" "Yes, Sergeant." He smiled, a real one this time. As Mary left, her phone buzzed, a letter forwarded from the company mailroom. It was from Carter's mother, handwritten on lined paper. "Dear Sergeant Ihairinwian, words can't express our gratitude. You saved our Daniel. We pray for you every day. God bless you." Mary folded the letter carefully, her eyes stinging. She'd never been one for tears, but this hit deep. The next morning, Mary stood on the PT field, watching the sunrise paint the sky gold. Her squad was warming up, Jenkins leading stretches with his usual banter. Ruiz was there, mimicking Mary's posture, eager to learn. The board results wouldn't come for weeks, but Mary felt ready for whatever came next, Staff Sergeant or not. The crash had tested her, forced her to face her limits, and shown her what she could do. She was a soldier, an NCO, a leader. And she was home.